Hi everyone, this is Kelly from The Truth in Story, and I know there's a lot of stuff on the table, but what we're really here to talk about is the Celtic Shamans pack by John Matthews with the art by Jessica Potter. She is the artist who created, who drew the original Greenwood tarot, which was then redone as the Wildwood Tarot. Now she has not given the rights over to making another deck, and so when they re-released the deck, they used a new artist who is Will Worthington, who I adore. So quite a while ago, I made myself a little copy of, they're kind of warped a little bit. I'm going to have to put them under a press. But I made a little copy of the cards because she did release the images to be able to be printed, so you are able to legally do so. So I printed them on good cardstock and just put a little back vinyl, contact paper back and contact the front of them, and just wrote in the names. And so you can see that this is the original Wildwood, and these are small. They are, let's say this is like a bridge size deck, and it's a little bit smaller than a bridge size deck, but I quite like it because I can use it in nice little 9 cards and such. And so this is the gorgeous art of the Greenwood tarot. Much more shamanic in feel than the Wildwood is a redoing of the Greenwood because she wouldn't release the images. She had a change, I think, from everything that I can understand. She had a change in her belief system, and so wasn't following sort of this pagan path, and she didn't release for this to be reprinted. So Will Worthington came in and did an amazing job at repainting these images. Many of the same concepts are there, but I will say there is much to be said about both. This version, the first version, I would love, of course, to find the Greenwood. To find an actual Greenwood, it gets very expensive. It would certainly be one of my life goals to find a actual Greenwood tarot, but not very likely going to happen within my price range. So this is the next best thing, right? But I love, and because what it is about this deck, this way, is that it's got a very shamanic feel to it. Some of the cards just are beautiful, but I will say that sometimes it's not as cohesive as you have here. There is a little bit of different types of kind of art styles that kind of creep in, but it's absolutely stunning. I love it. Like I said, if I was able to get a hold of, for a decent price, to get a hold of a Greenwood tarot, yeah, there's no question. However, one of the beauties about the Wildwood tarot, which is a remaking of that, and he did like I said, they stayed, close to the same imagery, and of course, I know some people don't, but I love Will Worthington's art. And one of the nice things is that I believe this has become much more of a cohesive unit. Artistically, there's very much a cohesive feel to the entire deck that is beautiful and still very shamanic. It's just gorgeous. It's stunning. I use this deck for all intention settings and that type of thing. And then I also use this deck for special readings, generally in 9 cards, and I like the small size for it. So I'm happy to have it. So this is the artwork by the same artist and the same, so John Matthews, who also did these decks. This is the same artist that did the Greenwood tarot. I'm going to leave those out because I probably want to show them together once we get done. Let me put these aside. This is the bag for this, but I got these little tags for the things that are in bags so that I can tell what they are. I'm going to move this over here. So that's the artist. That's why I have that out. One of the reasons that I really wanted this once I realized that it was her artwork, number one, is because even though to me sometimes the artwork in style isn't necessarily one that I much prefer. I love Will Worthington's art artistically, but there is a gut level reactionary feeling to the artwork of both the Greenwood and then this deck as well that is a really powerful experience. That so I wanted it for that, but I really had wanted it also for the book. For my experience, I have quite a few John Matthews books and decks, and he is an amazing writer and an incredible researcher. I have other videos on this, and I need to just do a video like directly on shamanism. But one of the reasons that I love John Matthews is that he explores Celtic shamanism from the old. He realized, he studied shamanism outside of Celtic, and he wondered, is there a connection, as most cultures do have a shamanistic element to them? Is there an element of that in Celtic mythology, which he found in the mythic cycles and the stories and the poems, and so he relates everything that he learns about Celtic shamanism, he pulls out from the old tales and the old songs and the old bardic poetry. And that for me is amazing, because I've been studying Celtic mythology and poetry, you know, since I was young and digging in the libraries. And so that really strongly resonates with me, how he is, the journey that he has created, or the system and the way of seeing Celtic shamanisms coming out of those mythologies, which means for me are very much key to my own practice, just inherently as I grew up with them. My first experience with the idea of Celtic shamanism was back in my mid-20s, when I had left the Christianity faith behind, and really for quite some time hadn't just decided, you know, I just don't want a spiritual path for a while. Everybody just leave me alone. Any of you gods and goddesses out there, just leave me be for a while. And then I, in closest succession, read two books. One was the Tao of Pu, which led me down Taoism and Buddhist pathway, and then the other was The Way of Weird. And this, I've mentioned this book before. It is based off of an herbal book that describes that they found from, I'm going to say the wrong, I hate to use dates unless I see them, because I have terrible number recall. Anyways, it was an old book that was found in a library that has recipes and rituals and things that a Christian monk, while kind of exploring the pagan Celtic area, to go in and proselytize, but first they kind of would go out and kind of get to know what were they up against, and sort of had written all these things down. And so the whole story is sort of a historical account, it's fictionalized historical account, a fictionalized historical account of the meeting of sort of of Christianity bumping into Celtic paganism and the Celtic shaman. And this really informed much of the way that I see, especially with the idea of weird, the web that connects us all, journeying, all these kinds of things of that nature. This resonated with me in an extremely powerful way, connective to some experiences that I had had before ever reading this. So that was my first experience with reading about Celtic shamanism, but everything that I know, everything that really resonates with me on a spiritual path came from the mythic cycles and stories and folk tales, primarily around Celtic mythology. I recently last year picked up The Celtic Shaman, a handbook by John Matthews, which I have really enjoyed. Not on all of it. I actually think the guidebook in there, this is a little bit of a better start in some ways, but the use of the wheel and where everything sits on the wheel and things have been really powerful for me. And so this is a great book, and I quite enjoyed it. I'm obviously going to have to read it multiple more times. But one of the things that John Matthews is so amazing with is he always gives, not so much, I don't know if in the book, But yeah, his bibliographies to find other texts are just phenomenal, and that goes for his deck books as well. I'll show you in even this little one. He just does an amazing job giving you all of these resources that he took things from, and being able to find so many other books that you can read that influenced the way that he writes about things. So from after kind of rereading this for the billionth time and reading the Celtic Shaman, I had put together my own, which I have a video on, my own kind of shaman's pack. They're also called crane bags. I have a version of I have 3 Wild Unknowns, but I have this trimmed version of the Wild Unknown. I have a little, this bounded leather. I have my Geomancy figure of the year, and then these are actually I'm doing not a wheel of the year monthly, but by the Sabbats, and so that just kind of a reminder of which ones I have. I have my meditation beads that I have both a feather. It came like this with a wolf. The wolf and the crow are my totems, and then I added in a feather for crow, and then it has the moon on one end as well. And then I have a bag of stones, which I use, and again, I'll link the video to this below, but I use it to cast the circle of the directions. It connects with the different Sabbats, as well as connects to the moons. And so these are all the stones for that. And then I usually have, I don't know where I put them at the moment, but I usually have a bag of geomancy sticks that are out for the moment for some reason. Release them. No, those are another one. Anyways, those I must have used them for something, so they're not in there at the moment, but normally it has casting sticks for geomancy in here. And so that is kind of what is in my crane's bag, so to speak, at the moment. Put that up. So when I have seen this a number of times. I also picked up this bag for it because, of course, Celtic shamanism and Celtic mythology in general, the idea of the world tree is something that is across many cultures, right? You're going to get this in Norse mythology. You're going to get this across many different cultures. But for any type of shamanistic work, sometimes it's a pole. Some certain cultures use in shamanism, it's the pole, and some is the tree. And so for Celtic shamanism, it's the idea of the tree. And I wish this had roots on it, but I had seen this at Books A Million and thought, oh, that would be fantastic for this particular pack that I'm getting. So that's that. So I had seen this. This is a second edition of it. This is, I believe, we'll have to wait until I reopen it up. I put it back together. I have read the book. I took it out and read the book. I think this is the 2000... I don't know. There's 2 versions of this. And so it comes in a box, and it does have, at first I was like wrestling to get it open because there was no notch. I'm like, why do you make boxes that don't have the notch? Well, it is a notch. It's on the front, the top and the bottom, which I do think is rather strange. But once I do this, I won't be probably putting this back in here, so it won't really matter. So we have this beautiful blue box. It is a nice box that you can store it in. The book fits in it snugly and beautifully. It's a big book. Again, part of the reason that I wanted this was for this book itself, which is 176 pages of a lot of really great information. I've already read it. It's fantastic. And then the cards sit in here. Now, it's plastic, so that's not going to break down. So they'll start to slide. A lot of the paper ones, the stuff will slide down in here, and you can't get cards lost in it. This is actually plastic, so it's not going to do that. So it's a nice little box to store things in. I'm going to just close that up and stick it over here, though, because let's take a look. Now, I will say that one of my cards is damaged, and so I could, this is the only deck that they had, but I already intend to immediately cut these white edges off of here. I know that I have white edges on here, so it would go, you know, beautifully, but I really, a lot of the spreads that you use this with are larger, and to me, it affronts, there's so much beautiful color. For me, the white border just bothers me. It doesn't bother me in this deck, which is funny, but I needed to have that. I could cut the sides off, but I did want to have the title there. So it doesn't really bother me, but this one it does. I have that. I knew when I saw the cards online that I would be cutting off the edges, so I decided to go ahead and get it. I saw this after I purchased it, and I was like, oh, it was the only one they had, but it doesn't matter because on the backs are all these colors, which I also don't particularly like. They are nice because they do show there are different categories or you know, different things which we'll talk about, different aspects of the deck, and that's what those are for. But they're pretty obvious. A, they're numbered, and B, if you know anything about the deck at all, it becomes quite obvious what they are and easy to look up. So I intend on trimming those off, and I will show those to you after we kind of go through the setup of the cards. Then I'm going to trim them and do the rest of the walkthrough without those. And I know borders don't always bother me, and especially white ones, but this is such a richly colored deck that I really don't like the borders. It distracts me. Some people it's really nice because it makes a window to go into. You kind of feel like you're going into the frame. For me, that would feel like I was stopping me from going into the frame. So to each its own. So yeah, so that's the deck itself, but let's take a minute to look at the guidebook, because I actually think that this is like one of the stars, even though obviously I'm excited about the cards. Again, it does talk about his other shamanistic books, the Celtic Shaman, and what is... One's more of a, I'm trying to see what his other, here, Taliesin, Shamanism and the Bardic Traditions in Britain and Ireland, which was later reprinted as Taliesin, the Last Celtic Shaman. This really traces how he kind of and I see, you know, I've got a lot of weird shadows here. Let me turn this light off. And then I'll just have to brighten the thing, because that was making a really weird shadow on there. You can see I highlighted in a light gray, but I've already read this and gone through it. I have to try to find that book, but that goes in more how he pulled out the shamanic tradition from the different stories and Bardic, you know, the cycles and things. And then the Celtic Shaman, which is the one that I have. So he talks about how you don't have to have either of those, but they make good sort of preamble to this. And I will say this feels fairly, you know, complete just as a kind of small intro, and it gives you a lot of good information. But then I can definitely see also, I would also, if you're interested, I would also get the Celtic Shaman. I can't speak to the other one. And this does have, the Celtic Shaman does have some of that historical context. So I would say even those two books are probably a good companions. He goes into early shamanic practice. He really does talk about a little bit about how he goes into finding it. He also talks about how shamanism is not a religion. And that's one of the things that really spoke to me when I first was introduced to the way of weird, is the idea of being a shaman or having following a shamanistic path isn't one of religion. It's very much, in my mind, similar to the Buddhist path. So for me, Buddhism, and again, there are Buddhist ways in which Buddhism has been used as a religion, but at its primary core for myself, Buddhism is a philosophical way of being, a way of seeing the world, and the same thing with shamanism. Oh my goodness. And one of the things that I really love that John Matthews points out is one of the things that it really appealed to me when I first read The Way of Weird so many years ago. Coming out of such a strict religious construct, was the idea that you really didn't have to follow a specific religious path. It's not a religion. And that's the same appeal that Taoism and Buddhism had to me, is that yes, there are forms of Buddhism that have become more of a religion, but the core of Buddhism is not about religion. There isn't a God or a deity. Buddha did not consider himself to be a god. And when asked, about and so the same way it applies to shamanism in my way of thinking, because shamanism is a way of, just like as Buddhism, for me, Buddhism is a philosophy. It is a way of seeing and interacting with the world and with our path, the way that we walk in the world. And shamanism is the same thing. It is a way of walking in the world. It is a way of seeing in the world that is doesn't have a specific deity attached to it. Now, obviously, you can have shamans who do work with specific deities and things, but the actual shamanistic path is not a religious one. It is a way of living and being within the world. And so I love how he points that out, and that many religions have shamanistic foundations, and you can even find this in Christian mystics, and he does talk about that as well. Actually, I think it's right here. He does talk about there's no reason you couldn't be a Christian shaman either. And really, if you read things like Julian of Norwich, her Revelations of Divine Love, and some of the older Christian mystics, you can see and feel that sense of that shamanistic path through Christianity as well. He does talk about ancestry, because there is, but he talks about, and interestingly, about ancestry just in terms of your cultural, your genetic ancestry, and how that can influence things, and your connection to the earth, which is quite interesting. He talks about how the ancestral bloodline of an individual will speak the most loudly in shamanic work, and that if you are in a different physical land, than your shamanic your ancestral bloodline, that can get complicated, and just makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of getting deeply into the land. But then many people who are outside of their cultural land are also themselves multicultural. So say if you're North American with Celtic heritage, with your Irish heritage, like myself, you also might have Native American, as I do, within you. So then you have a blood tie to the land as well as to the Celtic ancestral bloodline. So that was quite interesting. I believe that paths, whatever paths they may be, spiritual paths, even deity paths, different things of that nature, while I think it can be easiest, right, perhaps, if you have a direct connection to the land or to that ancestral bloodline, while that might make the way easier, I believe they all go to the same source. So for me, mythic cycles and religious ideologies and the mythology of religion all speaks to something greater and above land masses and above ethnicity and above cultural separations. I think that they're all speaking to the same thing. They're just, the story is different depending on time and place. So that to me is not something that precludes people from working in a certain way. Again, he talks about shamanism not being religious. It doesn't have a specific god other than the universal, what they call the shaper. And the shaper is, in this deck, is broke down into 4 parts: the father, the mother, the son, and the maiden. But because of this, they can, have a touch and working with any deity that works with your personal path because of that. So I thought that was really good. It does go into the shaman's craft, and then it talks about the breakdown. I'm going to pause here for a moment and talk about the breakdown of the deck, because it is important, and some of the ways in which you might use the deck for journeying or intention setting, you're going to be specifically drawing from parts of the pack. That if you're just using a divinatory, which it does give you spreads and things for that, you're going to be shuffling them for the most part in, except for, with the exception of, so the tree of vision is sort of the card of vision it talks about. It stands alone, and we'll talk about it when we go through the cards, but this kind of stands on its own. And in some way, the first 3 cards, which, you know, 2, 3, and 4, they kind of, you sometimes are picking these out, but not always, because these are the movers. And so these represent the shaman. It represents you in different formats, in different ways. And you may actually choose to tap into the bardic version of yourself, or as the walker between the world, or as the wild man or woman. I wish they'd, well, you can't really say wild person. That would have been strange. But they do talk about how that this is not about gender. And so these, you might actually pick one that you want to focus in on, or come to the reading from the place of. So you'll see these are yellow. The white on the back of this one. And I wouldn't have minded the backing so much if they'd all been white, but the different colors I'm not too fond of. But anyways, I still want to trim this no matter what. So we have this standing alone. We have then the 3 breakdown of the 3 cards that represent the movers. How are you moving in this? You as the shaman, or you as the person coming to read, how are you moving within the 3 worlds? So I think that's really neat. The next, from 5 to 13, and we're going to go through the actual cards in a minute, but 5 through 13, whoops, 5 through 13, which have a red backing. These are the empowerers. So these are helpers. These are beings that support the shaman on his or her journey that you might meet on your journey. So we'll talk again. We'll be talking about these more closely. I'm just showing you the breakdown of the deck. The next one is, I believe, the 3 worlds. So, you know, shamanistic across many cultures believe in the idea of the 3 circles of the world. And in this one, we have the first circle as the firmament, the sky, the stars, what is above. The circle of 9, which rests on this plane, but spiritual beings are in this plane as well, such as fae energy and that type of thing. So we have the second circle. And then the third circle is down at the roots of the tree. You can see the kind of cave drawings on this particular version of it. So these are the 3 circles of the world. These represent with the green. And then the next section is the elements. So you have the mound for earth, because much of Celtic lore has got the mounds in it, and you'll go underneath the mounds into the earth. And so you have the mounds as earth, the beautiful wind, color of the wind for air, the burning tree, which is a wonderful icon that you'll see repeated in different things. That is for fire. And then the well of Sagus, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, for water. So you have the 4 elements. You can see why I will love this deck. And then you have from 21 to 31, you have totem animals. So these are totem animals that you might meet along the way and that can be helping. He does talk about at the end of the book that, you know, there may be ones that you may want to cut cards of similar size and print them out and create your own for ones that you might meet along the way, or your own. Like this does not have, it does have raven, or the crow, of course. So that works for me. But it doesn't have wolf. Although I will say for this type of journeying and this type of work that I mostly am tapping into crow for this, but I will probably try to make some type of a wolf card to add into here, and he recommends that at the back of the book. So those are the totem, and those are in brown. And then the last section has to do with the shapers. So these are different aspects of the creator energy. So we have the father, the mother, the son, the maiden, the lady of the earth, the lord of the sea, the lady of the moon and stars, and the lord of the underworld. And then the very last one is the lady of the cauldron, which is about initiation and stuff. Very, very shamanistic-y feel to that image, isn't it? It's beautiful. We'll look at those more closely. So that's how the deck is broken down, and as I said, you can see from the backs of them how you can, if you leave the backs on, very easily be able to, you know, separate them out if you're trying to pull from a pile. But I can easily, again, do that with the number system, because it does number, thankfully, the cards, so that works. Plus, you know, it won't take long to simply know if we're talking about an animal. Obviously, it is part of the animal totems. If it's part of the elements, it's the element. To me, it's quite obvious what they are. So that is the breakdown of, and it really goes in and talks about each of the sections and how those might work. He has a section on understanding the way that the world works. We have the mundane world, and we have the other world, and then there's the way between the worlds is that crossing. And what's interesting is that I have always had, since high school, this understanding of what I called walking the wall. In fact, I have a short story about walking the wall. It's that there are those people that can see between they see more, and people often take them as being crazy or tapping into demonic energies or some other negative way, but they simply see more than what everybody else sees. And so that idea of walking the wall is something that I have been working with since I have been young. And so when you see the kind of walking the way between worlds, it was like there was just so much resonance when I started to stumble on this type of understanding of the world. And so he goes into quite a bit about that and the understanding of the world. They really do, he does a really good job in this book. I feel in some ways, and I'll have to reread the Celtic Shaman again before I really want to make a strong statement on that, but I feel in some ways this is a really good one to start with and then go to maybe back to the Celtic Shaman. But I do think together they're probably really good resources if it's something that interests you. Talks about working with ancestors, and when they talk about ancestors and shamanistic, yes, you can often, he does talk about meeting with actual ancestors, actual family members who have passed, but they're also very much talking about the primal ancestors, which is a really powerful experience. And he talks about certain cards that will actually aid in that a little bit more than others. He talks about totems and power animals, totems being one that you usually keep for a longer period of time, not necessarily for a lifetime, but sometimes for longer periods of time. So for example, the wolf and the totem the wolf and the crow I've had for the wolf since I was a baby, and the crow from young 20s. Whereas power animals sometimes come in because they have something to help you with. So for example, the spider for me in the last year would be the spider and the bear. So it just that he talks a little bit about that. He talks about, again, journeying, how to journey, and there's another section where he talks even more about how you might go about doing shamanic journeying. And then it goes into the pack itself. So each card has a 2-page spread with an image of the card, the title of the card and the number, a kind of a description of what we're seeing in the card. It's the card of vision. It gives the keyword. It gives a description, not so much a divinatory meaning, but you tend to get the divinatory meaning from this. And then it goes into the lore. So what is the lore of this, and not just in Celtic, but it also talks, for example, about shamans. So for the tree, which we talked about as being sort of that sort of central idea to shamanism, or the pole, it talks about the pole, the central pole of the heavens is a symbol of prime importance to all shamanic cultures. It is seen as the link between the three worlds, and the shaman alone is able to climb it until high above the rest of the tribe. He can present an overview of the worlds, returning with information of the events taking place in other dimensions as they relate to the lives of the human beings below. Among the shamans of Siberia, the pole was symbolized by the central pole of the yurt, the skin tent in which these nomadic people dwelt and still dwell in Mongolia. Among the the Celts or the Celts, it was almost certainly a specific tree as signified by the number of references found in surviving literature. In Irish literature, for example, there are accounts of 5 great trees, and many stories are told of their size, power, and history. A poem from one old Irish prose, I'm not going to try to say the Gaelic, has this to say: Munga, greatest of oaks, or sacred trees, 3 fruits upon it, namely acorn, apple, and nut. And when the first fruit fell, another fruit used to grow. Now it was for a long time hidden until the birth of Conn of the 100 Battles, when it was revealed. Nineen, the poet, cast it down in the time of Domnall, son of Murked, who had refused a demand of Nineen's. Equally broad were its top and the plain in which it stood. 30 cubits was its girth, and its height was 300 cubits, and its leaves were on it always. This reference, together with others in Irish tradition, describe a number of sacred trees, each with its own guardian shaman. They seem to have existed until the Middle Ages at least, when they were either cut down by Christian missionaries or felled by their own guardians as a means of preserving their inner existence. All the references point to there being cosmic trees far more than simply totemic objects of the kind which appear in all shamanic myths, leaving us in no doubt of their primary significance. Within them reside the power of the tribe, and beyond this, the very lifeblood of the land. And then it provides a journey, a way in which you might journey to tap into that energy of that specific card. So that's what we have for each, and it's wonderful. The lore section for someone like me is amazing, and even if you just kind of tapping in and reminding, you know, of the myths that this would bring up. And for someone who maybe doesn't have any history in studying of Celtic mythology, that's a nice way to tap in, because then you can, if you really resonate with a card, you can look up Taliesin, you can look up Merlin, you can look up Finn McCool, and see, you know, if those start to resonate with you in those cycles. So that is a big chunk of it. Then, of course, is to do with the cards. And then there's a large section about using this for readings, and some of them in different ways. Some of them are actually setting up a journey that you're going to take. So you would actually pick specific cards depending on the situation, depending on the question that you want to go into with your journeying. You would actually set it up so that you could kind of set your intention for the journey that you're going to take. And then some of them are more what we would think of as divinatory, asking a question and getting 3 cards. The Shaman Path. So this is a spread of the way of the shaman, and this is again not placed specifically, other than sometimes you will choose what way you want to come, but then the other ones are random. And it gives an example of how you would read it. A beautiful element, some large spreads like the Element spread, the Inspirer spread, and then this amazing, which is based on Fionne's Window, which is all to do with Oghams. And there is a huge spread here that is used as well, which is really amazing, and the different questions based on the Oghams that would fall to on the window. And then I think there is one more. This is more specific journeying. And then the Solstice spread, which is amazing. And then this, where you use the entire pack and start to see, okay, well, who do you resonate as the shaman? Where do you fall? What are the cards around you? That's using the entire deck of cards. So there is just a lot. And then he gives some songs, some power songs. I love this. I used to have this memorized a long time ago, but this was a song that was attributed to an ancient Irish bard. And he uses this and says this is really great to use when working with totem animals. You know, I am a wind upon the sea, I am a wave upon the ocean, I am the sound of the sea, I am a stag of 7 tines, I am a bull of 7 battles, I am a hawk upon a cliff, I am a teardrop in the sun, I am the fairest of blossoms, I am a boar in its boldness, I am a salmon in a pool, I am a lake on upon a plain. I am a tree upon a hill. I am that which shapes, and I am myself shaped. I love that, those two lines there. You are both the one that does the shaping and the one that is being shaped. Love it. I am that which dreams. I am myself a dreamer. I am all beings. I am that which all beings become. Love that. Wonderful to use in kind of ritual use. Talks about some different ones that are, a couple that are from Celtic tradition, and then some of his own songs and how he uses those sort of as invocations. And so, yeah, there's actually quite a lot. And again, his idea of resources are wonderful. There are shamanic drumming that you can get that's made specifically to work with journeying in this deck, as well as with the Celtic Shaman book that you can get, so that you can use that to help you in journeying. And he talks about the shaman's drum and using a drum, a hoop, so all these different resources, and then a ton of further reading. These are 3 columns of further reading that you can do. So amazing. His books are really amazing resources, and personally, I think that this book by itself, obviously, a chunk of it's to do with the cards, but I definitely think it's worth it just for this in combination with, where did I stick it? Where did I stick it? With the Celtic Shaman. Like, I think these are probably 2 really great resources. I can't speak to his third because I haven't read it yet. So there is that. I know this is a long video on the book, but nobody has to watch it.